Welcome back to the series. This is module number 4, and we are going to look at the last part of the social role valorization definition: the enablement, the establishment, enhancement, maintenance, and/or defense of valued social roles for people, particularly people who are at value risk, by using as much as possible the culturally valued means. So you remember in module number 2, we talked about valued social roles. Module number 3, we talked about devaluation that puts people at value risk. And so now we're going to talk about culturally valued means. Now, what do we really mean by that? Well, the bottom line here is we're saying when we're assisting people to establish, and grow into valued social roles, we want to offer to them the culturally typical ways, the ways that the other students use to be in the role of student, to be in the role of a roommate, to be in the role of a member of the drama club, to be in the role of an employee, to be in the role of an intern, and so forth. And we want to support people to have access to those roles in the most typical way possible. So the idea that Dr. Wolfensberger kind of put words around of supporting people in the most typical ways possible, offering the most typical opportunities in the most typical way possible, was the culturally valued analog. So that's a lot of language. Let's try to break that down just a little bit. So let's go to the definition of the culturally valued analog. So first of all, when we're talking about analog, we're talking about a model or comparable to. So when we're thinking about life after high school, starting on your path of transition into your young adult life, we can think about, well, what are the typical opportunities that are out there in our society for all people who are going through a transition? What's the societal practice? Well, there are probably many practices, but we're particularly focusing on that of post-secondary education. Okay, so now post-secondary education is clearly a societal practice or opportunity that we encounter with very reasonable frequency within the valued sector of our society, or the people who have the valued status. So it's a very well-known, I think I mentioned in the last presentation, universities and colleges for hundreds of years have existed and provided opportunities for people as they're going through transition. We're all familiar with that. It's very we've seen it a lot. It's part of our history. Therefore, number 2, most members of our society would be very familiar with this form of pursuing your transition, going on for further education after high school. And it also is a practice that most members of the society would hold very positive images and expectations of. In fact, many parents, sometimes even before their children are born, are putting money in savings so that they can pay for college or university or another kind of higher education for their child. So it's something that is, seen with reasonable frequency, people would be very familiar with and would think about in a very positive way. Now, it's interesting if you think back to something that I said, in module number 1, that while these opportunities are out there in our society, they hadn't been offered until, the past 35, 40 years to people with intellectual disabilities. So this idea is saying, open up the possibilities that are there for citizens who have a valued status in society to people who are at risk of the kinds of things that we finished talking about in module 3. So, when it comes to the culturally valued analog for transition life after high school, and the idea of post-secondary education, I'd like to share a quote from a publication called A Passion for Full Inclusion. This quote says, "As culturally valued institutions, colleges and universities have extraordinary resources available to students. Everything a young student needs to develop into adulthood is usually available to them on a college campus. Students can learn how to make friends and have a variety of relationships, engage in challenging academic study, learn to compete in the world of work, learn how to do simple things like your laundry, manage your budget, make decisions. And although, of course, each institution of higher learning is different, colleges and universities in general represent a culturally valued avenue for transition that has worked well for centuries." So, of course, we will want to offer that culturally valued opportunity to people who have been disenfranchised and marginalized. And particularly, we're speaking in this presentation about people with intellectual disabilities. And I want to say the good news is we've made a lot of progress with this. So in module number 1, we talked about, the number of programs that exist throughout our country, the way we've been able to grow programs here in Pennsylvania. So we're doing well in terms of opening up the possibilities for students with intellectual disabilities to have access to the culturally valued analog of post-secondary education. Now, as with anything, we need to keep growing. We need to keep learning. We need to keep really sharp on what we're doing. So sometimes, even though we're offering opportunities to people, when people get to the institution of higher learning, the practices that we put in place aren't always in line with what happens for the students without intellectual disabilities, what happens for the typical students. And this is where we think that this idea of the culturally valued analog is also very helpful. Whatever we're doing, designing our orientation program, designing helping students to come up with a course of study, doing their freshman seminar, getting involved in life on campus, living in the dorm and having a roommate, whatever it is, we can look to this idea of the culturally valued analog to guide our practice. We can say, how is the freshman seminar conducted at this particular institution, whatever it is, for freshmen? What kind of support do they get? How do they pick their topics for the seminar and so forth? And then that is what we want to offer to the students who are part of the programs that we are establishing. Maybe we need to, add some support of some kind, but we want to do it in the most typical way possible. When we are designing an orientation program, if we really wanted to use what's in place for typical students, we would think about the students who are applying to our programs to actually attend the orientation program for all incoming freshmen. And then maybe there needs to be some added support in certain ways for certain students to fully participate in that regular freshman orientation. When we're thinking about, I know one young woman who was at one of our universities here in Pennsylvania and very much wanted to become part of a sorority. So there are a number of young women on the campus in Westchester University who would like to are interested in joining a sorority. And so that young woman was assisted to follow the processes for learning about the sorority, for meeting other sorority sisters, for learning about the process of rushing a sorority, and even to go through the process in the typical ways that all of the other sorority sisters went through in order to become a member of the sorority. The culturally valued analog in actual practice, and that's really where we're at here, is in the practice, the everyday practice of students being involved in inclusive post-secondary education. This culturally valued analog can give us so much direction. Whenever we're thinking about how to structure something, what kind of support to provide, and so forth, we always start with the question, how is this done for students who are matriculated? So in summary to this idea, the culturally valued analog can give guidance for any number of things. How the physical environments people are in, the activities that people are involved with, the decisions that people are making and how they're getting advice about their decisions, and so forth. And I would like to say that in Pennsylvania, we do have the consortium that I mentioned in module number 1. And in that consortium, we have many members who have worked quite extensively with this idea of using the culturally valued analog to really guide and inform our practices. And so we do have resources available to you should you want to have further conversation about this, or maybe brainstorm with other members who have worked and are continuing to work with this idea of the culturally valued analog. What we're aiming for is to give people access to the good things in life so that in turn they can have a good life, for each person have a good life according to what they are striving for in life. And one of the very potent ways of accessing the good things in life is to assist people to find, enter into, grow into, and get rooted in valued social roles. Valued social roles, remember we talked about all of the benefits of those roles. So they tend to bring the benefits that fall in line with a lot of what we would think about in terms of the good things in life. And particularly here, of course, we are thinking about valued roles within the context of inclusive post-secondary education. I'd like to just share this quote with you from Dr. Wolfensberger: "Where there is passion, there is hope." And so I see a lot of passion in inclusive post-secondary education, and that gives me a lot of hope for the future of many young people with intellectual disabilities. There is one more module which I know you're going to enjoy. It's a film called Opening Doors to College, and it will give you a really good look into 2 different programs within this state: Integrated Studies at Millersville University and the program at Temple University. So I know you're going to enjoy that, and it will be a very vivid illustration of all the things that we've talked about in the first 4 parts of this series. Thank you very much for all of your hard work and your interest in inclusive post-secondary education. And remember, the people from Pennsylvania Inclusive Higher Education Consortium are always here to help. Thank you very much.